the Foreign Office, Manuel, Valeska, and also Nils von Redeker said, we need to take a closer look at what the 10-year process of the Berlin process really achieved, and we should do a mapping study. And then we said, oh yeah, we would love to do this, but we certainly can't do by ourselves, but we want to do this with esteemed analysts and authors from the region. And a few months later, I'm very happy to report that the mapping study is sitting on your chairs. Maybe you're sitting on them, or they are now below your chair or in your lap. But it is today the launch of the mapping study. And we want to take the first panel to take a closer look at the 10-year anniversary and the process the last 10 years and see what worked well and what might not have worked so well, and where we want to move, how we want to move forward, and what we want to achieve. And for this, now also our two authors are cabled. I first ask our two authors to the stage, Silvana and Marika. Thank you so much. First of all, you come up here so that everybody can give you the applause you deserve for getting through this mapping study. So before I ask the other panelists to the stage, I want to ask you, how were the last few months doing that study?
Interesting and intense, I have to say.
Interesting and intense. And for you?
I would say surprising. No matter how much you think you know about the Berlin process, every now and then you find something new. So it was rather intense, I would say, and it was eye-opening in terms of how much this process has done, but how much more it could do.
Thank you so very much. And I think this is already a good teaser to say there are lots of things in there which might surprise you. Also, those who have worked diligently in the process for the last 10 years, we hope to surprise. And for this, maybe you two can already take your seats. And with this, I would like to ask our other three panelists to the stage, Manuel Sarrazin. Give him a big applause. Armand Scarpi, also for you a big applause, come on up here. And also to Albert Hani, also a big applause. Please join us here. So you see, everybody seems to know each other, which is really wonderful. Yes. So I'm not Christian. I think I'm going to join you over here. So how we wanted to do this panel, and please, if you don't know our panelists, we also have a wonderful bio book where you can read up on their CVs and what they have done in the past. Because we are already a little bit behind the time, we want to jump right into the discussions. And how we are going to do this, we are first going to hear from our two authors about the study. I will do diligent timekeeping, and then we want to jump into the discussion on the panel as a whole. And we'll have to see a little bit if we then also can bring you in with a few suggestions how to move forward. But first of all, I hand over to the two of you.
Thank you very much. I will start first, and I just want to say it's a high task to present such a complex endeavor as the Berlin process in 5 minutes. So obviously, we cannot tell you everything, but you have the study on your chairs. So we'll just give you a few highlights and the most important aspects of the study, findings and outputs. And then you can ask questions in the session or afterwards privately in the conversations. So you all know, Berlin process was established by Angela Merkel in 2014. I'm not going to talk anymore about history, but certainly the motivation was to understand better what has happened under the umbrella of the Berlin process for the past decade. There were 10 summits held in 8 countries. First was Berlin Conference, called Berlin Conference in 2014, with only 2 countries firmly on board, France and Austria, only to grow to 10 partner countries, 9 EU member states, and plus the UK, and 6 Western Balkan countries. For 10 years, there were more than 100 formal and informal meetings of the ministers, civil society, various stakeholders, all of whom contributed to the development of the Berlin process. In the study, our methodology was to look at the available documents, outputs, but also some great literature and analysis of the Berlin process in the past 10 years. We divided the study into 6 policy areas. You will see if you look at the printed copy. And this is more to help us, with the analysis, but obviously all the areas are intertwined and highly relevant to one another. So I was, and I think one of the main findings of the study certainly is that among all the outputs, and we identified 42 outputs and around 40 topics, some of them are already sustainable and are likely to remain sustainable, while the others have sporadically appeared on the Berlin process agenda. And what drives sustainability is like 3 pillars. One is commitment of the partner governments in the Berlin process. The other one is structured financial support for specific initiatives and projects. And finally, organizational support, for example, like RCC, for the implementation for specific initiatives. Where these 3 pillars were not firmly established and identified, it was more likely that the initiative will not be successful, or at least will be less successful. So, for example, in the domain of societal cooperation, we have to recognize the Civil Society Forum, which was established in 2015, and certainly managed to come back every year and to contribute to the Berlin process and to all policy areas and topics, but it's not financially sustainable because it doesn't have dedicated funding, and as such remains problematic and depends on the hosts or the chairs each year on whether it will be held or not. So that's one of the challenges. Other areas, how long do you have? Other 2 areas? I'm just going to mention other 2 areas that we looked at are political and security cooperation, extremely important with the deteriorating situation across the West, stability across the Western Balkans, and foreign policy, which focused on the collaboration of the foreign ministers, key actors in the Berlin process, and bilateral disputes resolution that managed to stay on the Berlin process agenda.
Thank you so much for this concise and timely introduction. And with this, I hand over to Silvana.
Thank you, Stormy. Yeah, you have the study in front of you. There are lots of details. I would just briefly summarize that these 10 years were very rich, not only in content, as there are 43 outputs that are noted in the study as different initiative declarations and so on, but it was also very rich in context. That means that everything that was going on a global or EU level, and particularly on the level of the Western Balkans, was reflected in the Berlin process. And that is really one of the major value added to the process itself. It represents a very specific format of dialogue between the Western Balkan countries and the 10 partner countries. There are so many at the moment in the Berlin process. So the only thing that was not that was identified maybe as a challenge was that the process has not been institutionalized. That means it started with a framework of 4 years, No secretariat was set, no designated fund, and that's why we have quite a peculiar form of financing through different instances. However, that is one of our recommendations, that maybe a small secretariat will actually contribute to following the process in a way that it will be clear what are the achievements, what is the potential for further achievements, and what are the areas where still some work needs to be done. We have elaborated on 6 policy areas. I was working on regional economic cooperation, transport and connectivity. It was set as a one package, and that's one where we have really tangible results. One of them that is often mentioned is Rome as home regime, which enabled the countries to connect each other. These type of tangible initiatives are something that actually brings the process, the Berlin process, closer to the citizens. And that's one aspect of the Berlin process that needs to be reinforced. Another challenge or driving force that we realize it's there, and it actually counts for all the initiatives that were successful, is the policy alignment. Very often, the initiatives that are initiated at the Berlin process require policy alignment among the Western Balkan 6. And not always that's an easy task. So having a secretariat or somebody that will coordinate that could actually bring to your further successes. The third driving force was already mentioned, but I will again reinforce, is financing. Financing was done on different levels. It was done by the countries that hosted the summits. It was done by the European Union through IPA program on financing different initiatives and so on. But still, having actually a study on complementarity on the financing and seeing what amount of finances were actually channeled into the Western Balkan process is something that should be done. That was not within the mandate of this study. It was not an impact evaluation study. It was actually a mapping study. And it was already mentioned by the minister, the keynote speaker previously, that now we need to focus on climate changes and so on. We have the green agenda, and we have also new topics that were introduced in the past 2-3 years. They're all noted in the study. So a need for more proactive approach towards getting better results and toward higher transparency with regards to these results, it's needed. And me personally, I'm really happy that this study was done because, as I said at the start, no matter how much you're working in certain area of the Berlin process, you will see that there has been much more done. Acknowledgement of the successful initiatives is really needs to be done. And also, I hope this will be a further encouragement to the civil society to provide even a higher impetus of realization of the initiatives. Thank you, Stormy.
Thank you very, very much. Just in case, if you're wondering why there is this chair, it's not that we have forgotten a speaker, but this is a chair for you to then also join us. It's not the hot chair. It's the chair to engage in the discussion. So this is your invitation to join us up here also in a little while. For the first round, I would like to do a very quick, fast answer round. What sometimes strikes me is when I meet people who are actually from the Western Balkans or from Germany who have been working on the process, and they're still saying, I really don't know or think what this Berlin process is about. And that strikes me sometimes as strange, because I think there's a clear definition, but there might not be. So the first round, I would like to ask all 5 of you to say just in one sentence what the Berlin process is about. And maybe I can start with Manuel. What is the Berlin process about?
So, Stormy, there is the German author and poet Heinrich Heine, who once said the famous sentence in German, was Schläge sind, das weiß man wohl, aber die Liebe. So, what means being beaten up, everybody knows, but what love is, ... So Berlin process is like love in this. Nobody can really say what it is, but everybody is trying to achieve something there. And I think today for us it is that Berlin process is that 7 economies managed out to vote together in CEFTA bodies on moving forward. One sentence.
Thank you very much. Albert, what is the Berlin process for you?
Well, there might be a definition, of course, but we as a peace building and reconciliation organization, of course, see Berlin process as as a noble initiative, I would say, that works on compassion and mutual respect among the communities in Western Balkans in order to create, as the minister said, new pathways to European family, wealthy and healthy there.
Thank you so much. Secretary General, what would you say?
Well, thank you for a very tricky question, because it's very difficult to summarize in one sentence what is Berlin process. But to do it more poetic and more empathic, I would say promoting love between Western Balkan countries and promoting love between Western Balkan countries and the EU. So to say, bringing our region closer together and bringing the region closer to the European Union, in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. I didn't expect our panel to be so poetic, but it's wonderful. Silvana, what is the Berlin process to you?
Of course, we read lots of definitions about that, and we had interviews with the host countries over the year, and it was interesting to hear what Berlin process is actually for the people that were part of it. And that somehow changed my definition of the Berlin process. I knew before starting to work this study that it's a format for a very constructive dialogue where the Western Balkan countries and the 10 partner countries from the Berlin process are actually free to exchange all the regional and other issues. But after that, now I would say Berlin process is a growing organism. It's something that has all the parts to and could function very coherently. But there are some parts in the puzzle that needs to be designed, put, or recognized by all the parties. And that may be love as well.
Marika?
I would say, I mean, we need to think about what existed, how much love existed between the Western Balkan countries in 2014, and we have to agree it was very little love. So actually, Berlin process is a platform that offers support, political support, to any intention or aspiration for connecting between the Western Balkan countries and also partner countries in order to grow and ultimately achieve regional cooperation.
Thank you so much for this first lightning round. So in the second round, I would like to dig a little bit deeper into what has been achieved before we then also talk about what might not have been achieved so far. Manuel, can you tell us in a nutshell what the big achievements are?
I think the biggest achievement of Berlin process are those which are not inside Berlin process anymore, but have been taken over by the European institutions. Because already also your introduction made clear that there's not real big financing behind. Berlin process is not reaching the administrative structures in the region, and we don't have a secretariat or even not something like implementation, securing body, supranational, which or who could like overrule or influence when there's missing political will to implement the achievements. And we have a lack of implementation, to be so clear. For example, with the mobility agreements, I'm not fine with the level of implementation so far. I would not underrate it, but I would not say that I feel that we were so successful as we should have been since 22 and that. But European institutions have this usually. They have the money, they also have over the enlargement procedure and over the growth plan, national reform programs, much bigger tools to get in. And in many areas, like for example transport, also energy, they have the legislative part under their control, not only on the European side, but also for the bilateral relationship between every single country and the European Union, over the SAAs, for example. So as we see now. So I think this is the biggest thing, that there are many initiatives which are today seen as European or European institution-owned initiatives like Transport Community, which were actually originated in the starting from the Berlin process. And now we don't have to work anymore on them. They have their own life. They are adult in Europe. And I think that this is also important, that the Berlin process, when it started, it has been seen skeptical in Brussels to a certain extent. And today we see that if we work together with different possibilities of how we act sometimes, but with the same scope, in a European concert, that as a team we can reach more than in another way. I think this is very important. So this is, I think, the most important point of it. I think there's one more point which is interesting. One is a bit big and one is very small but important. The first is the situation when you have the partners from the region around a table, and some I see here, for example, Odetta, there is this, which you know, in human resources, you call it diversity stuff, that when you have different perspectives because of different human backgrounds in a room, this can be problematic, very annoying, a lot of talks, but it also creates momentums where you can achieve more. And we have been proved, we saw this happening, that the situation that, you know, all the so-called like cultural prejudices about how every country, you have the group from the region around, you have to agree on something, and it fits together, that the region belongs together, even when there's so much conflict, so much problems, so much history. And Berlin process was able to give a table where everybody wants to come to get this momentum sometimes, that everybody wants to achieve something together. The second is we have a fixed protocol. So all the questions of flags and nameplates and stuff are fixed. And because I think if we now try to start up a new Berlin process, it would never happen, because of the one guy would say the flag has the wrong color, you know what I mean. I don't want to be more exact on this. So this is, I mean, it sounds so small, but thanks to Angela Merkel, we can always say we have a fixed protocol, we don't change it, instead of having like this, for domestic political consumption, very important, but for results, not totally relevant point, blocking other possibilities. Then, of course, on some areas we are not well enough. Implementation of the mobility agreements, for example. I also think on reconciliation. I think 10 years ago we had the hope that there would be much better state of art regarding reconciliation, which we could facilitate in Berlin process. I think if we look to the region, I fear it's not as good as it was 10 years ago, while it was not very good 10 years ago. At least the big hopes and the ambitions and the projects which we had the hope that they would drive history to a more positive side. We weren't able to materialize them in the way. And yeah, so I would not say that it's just perfect or something like that. But I think this format can be very useful to also achieve things we weren't able to achieve so far. If we are also able to focus in a strategic way on concrete steps, and not try to overload with a lot of stuff, declarations, which are then forgotten the day after the summit or even the same evening.
Thank you so much. For the last round, when we look into the future, we also will revisit the issue of institutional reform. What might we want to keep, like the protocol, and not touch? But maybe there are other things which there might be the need for a little bit of a reform. Albert, in Manuel's list of good points and implementation deficits, is there, from your point of view, what would you add? Yeah, Raiko. Yeah, that is the lead over.
He already mentioned Raiko, but through reconciliation, because Raiko, in fact, although we see that we can feel that not much is worked on reconciliation, Raiko is a resemblance, I would say, of reconciliation in the region, and the beauty of it is because it brings this spirit of reconciliation through youth, which is yet again something that is more acceptable for our politics than to come from somewhere else, especially if it is felt as imposed. I mean, yes, for having Raiko as a result of the Berlin process, for us poses a great burden in our shoulder, I must admit. It's not really easy to carry this burden because the expectations are very high from all stakeholders, including the civil society, but then our possibilities are really limited. I mean, we do a lot of work in direction of supporting youth in the region, on supporting youth employment or employability. We support the secondary schools, so we don't just do exchanges among youth in the region, but we also do now connect institutions in regional level, which is another type of work in the region that for now it doesn't require a lot of protocols, but yet again somehow it functions. And for me it's also a recognition that a lot of work on reconciliation needs to be done. We also just recently started with the initiative of Saracen here, the Youth Cultural Fund, which is another dimension of triggering young people to really tackle the issues of the society through arts and music and all the elements connected to culture. We do really a lot of work. We directly included over 20,000 young people in the exchanges. Indirectly, there are maybe even more than 50,000 of young people engaged indirectly in our activities. Numbers are big, but yet again, we cannot claim that we do enough. Without the support of the civil society, without the support of all the activities that civil society is doing, we won't be having any visible results in this direction. That's why I'm using this opportunity to call the civil society to cooperate even stronger. Yes, we've supported the civil society with over 240 projects, and we are planning to amplify this number even more these years. But this is not enough. It's not enough because the topics that we are tackling are not tackling all the needs of youth and all the needs of society. I mean, for example, we don't do much on environment, and I wish we could do it, but we still don't have expertise in that. Now, to turn a little bit the discussion, I want myself into the achievements. I want to say that Raiko, as such, it is a political statement, I would say, of the governments of the region to at least embark on the topic and work on the topic of reconciliation through youth. This is a very strong political momentum, and it is a result of the Berlin process. It wouldn't have happened if there was no Berlin process in place. That's my personal belief. The beauty of it is that now we are working on issues of values. Yes, there is something that is called interest, and the governments, of course, can cooperate much easier with in level of interest. But our work in Raiko and the work of the civil society is mostly related to values. But these values are hardly things that are hard to be seen as results, concrete results. But I strongly believe that while we work on the values, we actually pave the road, and as Minister Lurman said, we are creating pathways for better cooperation. We are literally creating these pathways. And we might be maybe reacting with our expectations from such processes, but the way how how this Berlin process have shifted the paradigm of understanding these issues as something that is imposed from outside, from, I don't know, from European countries, international community, towards something that, okay, this is might be our obligation, in fact, to deal with this. It's a big shift in paradigm, and it wouldn't have happened without the Berlin process, without the strong support, especially from Germany, France, and all the hosts of the Berlin process. Yet again, it remains our duty. I'm talking here also as also to civil society, to really secure ownership of this process in local level. Without that ownership, we will risk to constantly count the big results as the big failures. This is why I also invite the civil society to take courage and move in step of working more in track one without fear from getting labeled for being one-sided or supporting some political party. I mean, I'm bursting from...
I know. And before the panel, you already said you have so much to say, and I'm still going to interrupt you because we have still a few rounds to go. So there's a chance to come back to this. But we also want to hear from the Secretary General if you share the opinions of what we just heard, or if you would add other success areas.
To be brief, I would say just yes. I share the same thing, but not. Well, actually, speaking from a perspective of a diplomat, working for a long time in the Albanian Ministry for European Foreign Affairs, Berlin process was perceived as, in the beginning, with a lot of skepticism, frankly speaking. I have to be very frank with you. Because in our region are a lot of initiatives, not just in the region, but also in European scale. And all of them, or most of them, had one main focus: integrating Western Balkans as soon as possible to the European family. But given the fact that some of these initiatives, organizations had discrepancies, they had problems in achieving outcomes, and missing the financial support to reach their goals, we saw even these initiatives as a very skeptical one. But looking at the launchers of this idea, Germany, France, and other, say, leading countries within the European Union, we saw year by year a progress in what Berlin process have achieved so far during this decade. We see now a lot of regional mechanisms that are part of that process. Here is mentioned RICO, or Western Balkans Fund, or Common Regional Market. So it's quite a number of initiatives which tend to achieve tangible results in first bringing the countries of the region closer together, and secondly bringing the whole region. I was referring to the word love that I mentioned at the beginning, bringing this region closer to European Union. Minister Luhrmann just presented a very big achievement for Albania, which is about to happen in the eve of Berlin Summit, on the 14th of October. The next day, Albania will launch or will hold the second intergovernmental conference with European Union, namely starting the technical negotiations for accession to the EU for the first cluster of the chapters of acquis. And by the end of the year, we expect and really hope to organize the third one. So, speaking of these achievements, I would say that Berlin process has given a lot of contribution in that direction. It was very hard for our region, because I'm representing somehow the region, to set bridges in the past between us due to the historical divisions and prejudices over each other. But bit by bit, with this initiative supported by Berlin process as a mechanism, including not just the region but also European Union, we see now countries and societies closer together. We see civil society, for instance. We have RICO. We have Western Balkans Fund. I see in the room my dear colleague Jesh Murat, Secretary General of Western Balkans Fund. Some days ago they celebrated or commemorated the 7 year of the activity of Western Balkans Fund, which in its sense has gathering together the civil society, because I'm referring also to the topic of this panel, bringing society closer to each other. So, in this sense, we see less prejudices, more connections, more connectivity between us. And also speaking of economic cooperation between our countries, we have a common regional agenda, which is a common regional market, which is a very important milestone in our cooperation, because without economic development and connections, we cannot go forward. And we want to see our region coming closer to European markets. This is something we have to promote and to make our economy coming closer to that of EU. So, in a nutshell, I would say that Berlin process has achieved a lot, and of course it has yet to achieve. We are going to celebrate the 10th anniversary after some days, but we're going to see a new decade of Berlin process, and we need to see more tangible results. And in this respect, I would like to commend the drafters of the mapping study, and pretty much I fully agree with the findings of this study and the recommendations as well, because Berlin process needs, let's say, given also the similar initiatives, some point of reference, some mechanisms of organizing and getting together all events in the framework of Berlin process, and also to need more financial mechanisms. We really hope that with a growth plan, which is going to be, let's say, active in the forthcoming days and weeks, our countries will receive, let's say, financial incentive to make us more efficient and more able to reach European markets and our connectivity in our region. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. What I just noticed is that the picture which we are creating is very strange, with all the gentlemen on that side and all the women on that side. So I'm going to join you guys over there to break it up a little bit. So this seat is open now. So who can I invite to join us for a few minutes? Yes, please, come on up. And the first one who dares always gets an applause. So please always introduce yourself and always also say who you direct the question to, or if it's to everybody.
Hi, my name is Sokol. I work with CDI Albania and with React Lab in Kosovo. Basically, I congratulate on the study. I found it very interesting. However, I disagree with the recommendation of actually institutionalizing Berlin process. Recently, with the React Lab, we worked in research about the informality of the Berlin process, and especially the idea on the international governance system of informality and informal mechanisms functioning around the world. And we kind of found out that Berlin process functioned the way it functioned because of its informality, because it allowed for more flexibility and more agility in terms of how we address the topics, what topics we address, the way how we actually bring them to the Western Balkan countries. And we're saying this because, for example, many actually institutionalized mechanisms like CEFTA, RCC, even RICO have been having a lot of struggles to actually bring the Western Balkan governments to agree on something. And the moment that they were institutionalized, they were actually brought to this idea of having a consensus among the partners to how to deal with the things. And for example, if you do that, it's not easy to keep some of the things in check, because there's always a consensus. You delete something and you don't allow this flexibility, agility, and address and bring new topics all the time unless the governments agree. Whereas in Berlin process, the chairmanship brings something, they kind of need to go with it because the importance of the Berlin process that it brings. So yes, the financial institution would be interesting to bring into that, but the informality itself actually brought way more results than any formal institutions in the region actually brought. That was one of my comments, which I would really like to hear more about from your perspective. And I had another question for the reconciliation process and the things that actually didn't happen in the reconciliation. I really want us to think about the way how reconciliation actually was brought into the Western Balkan. you know, like the top-down approach that was used. Yes, RICO uses a bottom-down approach when bringing it through the youth, but it's really important to acknowledge that reconciliation cannot happen out of thin air. For example, the way how reconciliation was introduced to the Western Balkan based on the Franco and German reconciliation process, it doesn't have the same premises in the Western Balkan. We have countries which don't acknowledge many of the things that happened throughout the Yugoslavian conflict, and how the EU and how the international partners have been trying to induce this reconciliation to the region. It's highly questionable without the premises that the reconciliation needs to have. For example, some of the programs in RICO, especially on dealing with the past, they try to keep a bit of a neutrality in the way how they address. And I think reconciliation dealing with the past has nothing to do with neutrality, has to do with the fact, and has to do with the transitional justice and addressing things properly the way they were actually found. So I would really love to hear your comments on this.
Thank you very much. So I think, no, you're going to stay here for a little while before I kick you off again. So let's stay a little bit with the institutionalization and then also talk about reconciliation. So would you like to say something on institutionalization?
I could do that,
Yeah.
but first I will ask you a question. So, how many of these initiatives that are listed here in Annex 2, if you had a chance to see, were you aware of? We have lots of pages here. How many of them were you aware that they exist within the Berlin process?
I was for quite of them, like especially, I mean, I worked mostly on economical issues and also on reconciliation and peace building. I have the tendency to know more about that, but I was aware for many of I've been following Berlin process for so long, so I was aware for many of the things.
I ask you this because it's not the intention to set up a rigid institutional structure that would actually run the Berlin process as an institution, but to set a secretariat that would actually monitor what's going on and to provide impetus to the initiatives in order to have also some impact evaluation. Impact evaluation has not been done in any of initiatives that are there. So the idea is that it's not SEFTA and RCC are very different. Organizations sat on a different ground, and the way of decision-making in these institutions is different. The study has just came up. Of course, none of you had time to read it quite carefully. You will see also that at the end, in the conclusion, we also conclude that the format of the Berlin process stays the same. So we have this informality and so on. Maybe as a civil society, sometimes we are afraid of this institutionalization. But I'm from the academia, so I have this tendency to advocate that some institutionalization is needed in order to know what we are doing and gather better results. But any comment and any proposal is, of course, very welcome, and that's why we are here.
Marika, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. It's a very good question, of course. And we actually state at some point in the study that one of the advantages of the Berlin process is that informality allows it, and we highlight that as a positive thing, that informality allows it to bypass the complicated bureaucratic structures of the EU accession process and actually allows, engagement around certain areas, even if they're covered with the acquis, within negotiation frameworks. It allows to engage with these areas directly and to, to come up sometimes ad hoc with funding or with some ideas, or ultimately to ask the Western Balkan governments, what do you need? Do you need specific support in these areas so that you can achieve so and so? But as Silvana already said, the problem is coordination and monitoring, for which we think that Secretariat would be useful. And also there is another big debate about whether it should be just 10 partner countries, so 9 EU plus UK, or whether it should be open to more countries. And ultimately, the participants of the Berlin process and the previous chairs, they all pretty much said, you know, we kept it. There were other countries interested to come on board, but we kept the lower number of countries to make the communication easier and to actually achieving results easier as well, which doesn't mean that there is communication with Visegrad 4, there is communication with some other EU member states, but through different initiatives. And I just want to come back to your point about reconciliation.
No. We come to reconciliation in a second.
Okay.
Because I still also want to hear from Manuel if we need a secretariat or not.
I will not give a clear answer on that because, frankly, I think there are pros and cons. I think there are important pros, but there are quite striking cons. So I think to put the idea is very important to discuss the pros. The one point is that we don't have a real institutional memory for Berlin process. It is mainly the German government and the civil society, to be so frank. And then, of course, some other governments as well. But even in the German government, we have staff changing. And if after 10 years, also, you won't have automatically like institutional memory. Like, I don't know exactly how it was 10 years ago. And I don't know, I mean, we could call Angela Merkel always. But I think there are not many people, there are some left in some positions who you could call like 10 years ago, you had this and that position. Like, how was it then? But not like officially or institutionally. And this is, I think, a problem also regarding the overview on the implementation and the reminding of the necessary political will to implement. The other point is, one of the strengths of Berlin process is, and to be very frank and not diplomatic, Foreign Office not listening now, Niels. Today the Secretariat is the German Chancellery. This means if German Chancellery is inviting for a video call, it is quite different than the Secretariat of Berlin process is inviting for a video call. So it's a kind of informal formality. And I don't know exactly, there is a tendency if you have a Secretary General, then he's responsible for doing all the stuff, and then like, the governments could feel out of responsibility. So I don't know exactly how to solve this, but I see there an important minus. Especially also, we have in the European Union a structure of a council presidency and a rotating presidency, and it would be, should it be a copy or not of that? So we would have to be very clear on that. So there are pros and there are some cons. And the final contra has been named by you, and I think Albert knows it the best. Which country would give the first chair or the first Secretary General? And then you have to reach consensus about it, and then the probability is high that it would be blocked at a certain point. But do you want to have a German chair? So if it's about the Secretariat, which is basically helpful for the institutional memory and like secretary work, but I think this could be helpful, but then probably the main con would be the financing. Yeah, this is my 5 cents.
Great, thank you so much. Marika, a one-sentence intervention.
I would just say that, yes, I fully agree, but then on the other hand, the Secretariat would protect the Berlin process in case, for example, the next German government doesn't want to support it. Because if the next German government drops it, then...
About the next German government, you can be very, very sure that it will want to support it.
Okay.
Whatever is the outcome of the elections, I'm very sure on that. This is perhaps the biggest strength that, I mean, we know that if not the existing coalition would take place, some of the parties from an existing coalition would have some coalition with CDU, CSU. And if you talk to everybody in the coalition and to the colleagues from CDU, CSU, they're all on board on that. So this
Good
is...
to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really, when you also talk to parliamentarians from the different parties, they not always love each other. There's a lot of fighting, but they are all on board on the Western Balkans. There is really a lot of unity and continuity on that issue. We now want to also talk about reconciliation. And since Reiko was also mentioned a few times, can I ask you to jump in?
But I also wanted to say some words for institutionalization. I'm part of the story. I will just say one sentence. I mean, just for your information, we are already cooperating in regional level. What mostly we as regional initiatives need is synergies and coordination of activities and discussion about our mandates, projects, activities. This is something that we already do. We meet regularly with all the regional initiatives. This year it will be in Vienna, the energy community is organizing. There are also the special envoys for Western Balkans. They are also entitled to deal with these issues. The Sherpas are also there as contact points. Maybe, I mean, I hear for the idea for the first time, maybe it is good, but in my understanding, and you know, it's in our culture, we say if you want something to fail, form a commission. So we want those procedures and structures, but in this case, I think we should be hooked towards the topics that we are working, towards the target groups that we are reaching, and only focus on the results there. Now, this is also connected to consensus. I mean, the question maybe it's later I will talk about it, but yes, it is one of the biggest difficulties. As I said, it is these regional initiatives are political statements. It's very hard to reach consensus. I mean, everything is seen through ethnic lenses. You know, you were part also of Reiko, you know how difficult it is to work on commas, on asterisks, on the flags, on this and that, and you know that every single situation on the ground, every fight on the ground reflects directly in our work. However, this is exactly where I see personally the beauty of the Berlin process. It's nice to work with like-minded people. It's very nice to work with like-minded people and do...
That wasn't me.
The phone just clicked something. But the beauty of the Berlin process is exactly on that, to work on creating conditions for better understanding and the culture of communication that nurtures literally peace and non-violence into it. This is something that we missed all the time, and this is why we hardly sign any agreement today, because we see the others through enemy lenses. And this is connected to the last question with reconciliation. You're arguing that it is from top down the approach. I mean, I second your opinion, but I will also give some other arguments that are saying that, I mean, yes, the top-down approach, it doesn't give a feeling of ownership of these processes of the heart, but having in mind that there are a lot of initiatives on the ground that have worked a lot on dealing with the past. I see here, for example, Mrs. Kandic and RECOM and also all the initiatives that were very hard. These are very sensitive initiatives that are actually touching upon the interest of the political elite that doesn't really feel very happy to work on these issues. However, we know it is necessary because, as I said, we know we are creating values that will help politicians later to sign easy the agreements that they are now prizing everywhere, wherever they sit. The reconciliation process, it's a very hard process in which you cannot see really result. Top down, yes, and as you said, I mean, there might be a need for financial support. I mean, bottom up, but yet again, I think it should be a comprehensive approach of including all the stakeholders, from civil society to intergovernmental organizations such as RICO, to governments, really making them interested, and then, of course, the international community. We are often going with problems of reconciliation to international community, but have you ever approached governments and saying, hey, listen, we need to work on reconciliation and support us on reconciliation? And this is maybe our fault. We need to trigger them by also problematizing these issues as much as it is possible, so they understand that when we go to them, they need to really take it seriously. Like this, they are only expecting from foreigners to support this initiative.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. I will bring you in the next round because I do want, and we come back to you, I promise, I promise. But I would like to thank you, so to give somebody else also the chance to join us up here. So we ask somebody else to come up, and then I hand over to you again. So who would like to come up here and join us? Yes, please. Yeah, and please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Ellen Dellas. I'm from the Kvinna till Kvinna Foundation. We work with, we work with the Western Balkans on kind of using the EU accession to promote women's rights in the region, and work together with a lot of brilliant partner organizations across the entire region.
Okay. Thank you so much. Before you ask the question, I wanted to hand over to you, and then we come back to you for your question and your comment.
Well, thank you for giving me the floor, and just a few words on reconciliation. Well, in my perspective, Berlin Process has done a tremendous job with respect to promoting reconciliation in our region. And I want to date back the history. 10 years ago, it was almost beyond imagination to see all 6 Western Balkans countries sitting at the same table and taking decisions for their own region. I'm referring to, Albert talked about RICO, but I've been present while negotiating both agreements for establishing Western Balkans Fund and RICO with the city in Tirana, how difficult it was to reach a common consensus between the whole 6 representatives, namely speaking, representatives from Serbia and Kosovo, being together in the same table and negotiating an agreement where all these countries were considered as equal. And it was very hard, but now we see these countries present together. We see, we're referring to the civil society, we see NGOs coming from all countries of origin, pairing with each other and achieving tangible outcomes with their projects. I mean, with respect to reconciliation and connectivity between the peoples. Of course, in a forward-looking sense, given the somehow troubled situation that is still at present in our region, in a political level, so to say, fueling some old tensions, nationalism, I think that Berlin Process, through its mechanism, can do a lot to keep this stage of cooperation between our countries, and also to give more incentive to new initiatives, how to better promote reconciliation, peace and stability, because it's a key word, peace and stability and reconciliation as well, a key word for future integration, speedy integration in the European family. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Just for transparency reasons, why I'm calling Albert and Manuel by their first name is not a sign of disrespect, but that we know each other. So this is, since we haven't worked so much with each other, I wasn't cheeky enough to also jump to first name basis yet, but maybe we do that on the next panel. So please, over to you and your comment.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief, but I wanted to take the opportunity to mention that as part of this, I think Avi calls it an ecosystem of Berlin Process studies. Kvinna till Kvinna finalized this year a study on gender in the Berlin Process. And while we found some best practices that can be copied, unfortunately, it has been quite gender blind in the past 10 years. One of our key recommendations is that gender needs to be included in a much more comprehensive way as a cross-cutting perspective. And so related to that, I don't have the study with me right now. It's coming with my colleague from Belgrade in a few hours. So we'll have copies if anyone's interested. Otherwise, it's also online on our website. But I wanted to ask both to you, I saw one of the recommendations also deals with gender. So I was curious, from your perspective, what did you find in your in your study on that relates to gender in the Berlin process, and why did you include that as a recommendation? And then also to Mr. Sarrazin, how does Germany, because now, I mean, Germany has this year, for the first time, organized a gender equality forum. Kvinna till Kvinna were expert partners to GIZ and BMZ. Very happy to have been part of that. So wondering how Germany looks at and plans to continue this work, also on the basis of the feminist foreign policy. So those are my two questions.
Thank you so much. And I was able to take a preview at a sneak preview at your study, and it's really fantastic. So take a look at it.
Thank you. Yes, we think so too.
Well, over to you.
Okay, yeah, I can take this one. Thank you for your question. And we briefly talked previously, not enough, but hopefully this time we'll have more time to discuss about gender. And certainly, I mean, as we said at the start, so the study is more mapping of the initiatives than assessment or evaluation, which means we didn't look at it against specific criteria to see how, you know, how successful it is in different topics. But I mean, one thing was clear, and that's gender was not mentioned. It's not mentioned in the official documents. It's not mentioned in the declarations. It's not recognized in most of the outputs, except, for example, RICO or some research. So it's very clear that a 21st century initiative which is aiming for sustainable growth and cooperation and reconciliation of the Western Balkans is unimaginable to have something like this without having a gender component, because we all know why is that important: gender equality, gender equity, you know, gender perspective to anything that is aiming to develop the region. And I was really pleased to see that we had a gender equality conference first time this year, and I also spoke to GIZ, and I know that there is an intention to integrate it into the Berlin process permanently. But I think, I don't know, it's really interesting. I'm not entirely sure why it was overlooked, because we never got a concrete answer to that question. I don't think it was, it was intentional or some sort of malpractice, but certainly there was, it's a serious oversight, and that is why we also put a recommendation in the study that it simply has to be adopted, especially, you know, for the Western Balkan countries where gender angle to politics, to economy, to education is highly problematic and unequal. So we think it's important.
Thank you so much.
I will, as it is a mapping study, the forum was announced for 2024, and we put it as a mapping initiative. But I will now go back, I will connect this to institutional structure. It happened previously that some of the topics were introduced by the host countries and then they were abandoned. Having in mind that gender is a very important topic, we actually put it in the recommendations in order somehow to increase its visibility and to stay. And that is one of the cons of not having a secretariat or something, because if a host country place any topic, like this year it's your forum, then if the host country is not taking any efforts furthermore to develop that initiative, that could actually be something that just in a year or two will be completely in the past. That happened, for example, with the health issues. It was introduced during the COVID. Everything was about it in the Western Balkan Summit in 2020, organized jointly by Bulgaria and North Macedonia. And that was completely abandoned. And there is certainly something that should be talked about, topics related to health. So I gave this explanation just to say there is no specific reason, as we were not doing the impact evaluation and we were not also making any assessment of why it was not included before. But okay, it was announced, it's very important, is also very much related to the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's why we highlighted it. That was the reason to stay there and to develop more.
Thank you so much. Manuel, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, perhaps first, I also know from us, but also from GIZ and our partners from the Development Ministry, which is financing actually the gender event, and your cooperation is longer already there, that they are very delighted with it and they want to put this on a permanent basis, and which is fine. But I want to say two things. First is, I think it is relatively obvious that it's relatively easy to promote the first step of gender mainstreaming, which is having more awareness and rising of the specific gender-related perspectives on things. I think at the point when Berlin Process tries via multilateral or also bilateral initiatives to make steps on the ground, we of course step into structures on our side as well as on the regional side, where we need for implementation of it, implementation bodies which are not gender sensitive yet as much as we wanted. And I explicitly say on our side and on the regional side. This is not only for the gender topic, I think, frankly, this is all even for the climate topic. For example, we invest in energy market bilaterally in the region, but you know the energy market in the region, as everywhere, is sometimes a bit political. But then you invest usually via government cooperation, and quite easily you are within structures which are perhaps not perfect, to say it diplomatically. And this also happens to this. So I think there's big points coming up there, but we have to try to tackle it. The second is, I think the awareness that one part of the problem of the region is the kind of role model of successful politician who, whether if it's a female, a male, or something else politician, is the classical role model of a seemingly male, strong leader. I think this problem is more being successful also on our side than being less successful in the Balkans, if you understand what I want to say. Yeah, and we will not be able within Berlin Process to cope with that. But of course, awareness rising and having more specific views there, and also developing perhaps more ideas can be also a step. Because I have to say it so frank, and this is a bit private, and I'm looking at Valeska. Valeska, please look at me. So stop me when I'm saying something wrong. But when we started our work around 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and we decided to take the mobility agreements as one of our core projects of the first summit in Berlin 2 years ago. This idea came, I mean, it was not my idea. It came, of course, via Valeska, everybody knows here. But actually, even she hasn't, it was not falling from heaven to her head, but from civil society and from your work. And I think this can be something that we institutionalize the gender work for bringing ideas up to us. And also to say this, we want to become better in implementing what we decided, also being able to agree more with the leaders on things which are coming from civil society. But of course, there is a 1 to 10 ratio in general of good ideas coming from you, which we are able to get the leaders of the region on deciding on it. Yeah, but this is the point. So we are very open on that. I personally think it's very important. But if you look to the debates in my country, not to talk about the region in my country, and what an argument is about like gender, it is of course not the most easy time to be most successful in it at the short run.
Thank you very, very much. We are almost at the end of this panel because you also need some fresh air and some coffee, and we need to stick to the timetable. But I want to conclude, so sorry for everybody who I couldn't integrate, but we are going to have wonderful following panels where there's still going to be an empty chair and then you can join up here. I want to close this round off by taking a look into the future, into the summit itself, and I want to ask you one question and looking forward to a short answer. What would make the upcoming summit for you a success? Can I start with you?
Well, looking at the report that the ladies Silvana and Marika has produced, Berlin process didn't look like this 2 years ago, again in Berlin. I remember the critics of the civil society and in other forums about the results and achievements. Looking at this report, it's already a great acknowledgement and recognition of what has been achieved in the Berlin process. And now looking forward, I'm really, I'm only thinking in direction of keeping and maintaining good relations with all the stakeholders in Berlin process in order to bring as much as it is possible results and just create expedited path towards the European family. This is our duty. This is very short from my side.
Thank you so much.
Well, let's be optimistic. I would say that the summit and the next decade of Berlin process will have more tangible results with respect to strengthening cohesion among our people on the region, our countries, our governments, as well as cohesion between the region and European Union. And my wishful thinking would be that in the next decades, all Western Balkan countries will be all together in the European family.
Thank you so much.
For me, the Berlin Process Summit will be a big success because I believe we will be able that all the six together decide to move on forward with concrete decisions to increase the cooperation and to stick to the common regional market. And that today we were able to have agreements decided in CEFTA with all seven, so plus Moldova, but not with a -1, with everybody on board, is a great signal for the summit. And I hope we will also be successful in this way with the action plan, the new action plan for common regional market. And I think this is the big success for the summit, which is linked to the political will of the leaders in the region to, after all the trouble we had before, which was quite visible in an unusual way, to get this done. Yeah, and I think we can be, this will be, I'm quite hopeful to say diplomatically, this will be a good news that in Berlin Process Summit, still after whatever is, and in these difficult times, in the end, everybody sticks together as a bunch of group of Western Balkan 6.
Thank you so much.
I would say it would be successful if it provides also some instruments how to move forward. This year we will have the Common Regional Market Action Plan 2 endorsed in the summit. But last year, let's not forget that in the declaration of the summit that was held in Tirana, they said a further policy alignment is needed in order to achieve results. So I would say it would be successful if the thinking of the leaders that will sit on the table is focused more towards the results. And here I have to mention the European Commission. The European Union has moved a step forward and introduced reform agendas for the countries, which are for the first time performance-based instrument. So maybe some alignment in the thinking of both sides, as they're both in the process, in both processes, would lead to further success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least.
Last but not least, I was really pleased and hoping to see it signed, the new joint declaration on reaffirming good neighborly relations and regional cooperation. I think it has some really important points and acknowledgements about what has happened so far. But for me personally, I'm really happy to see a recommitment to resolving bilateral issues between the Western Balkan countries and also with some of the EU member states, because ultimately they're currently blocking EU accession progress of some of the Western Balkan countries, and it has to be a goal. But I also want to use this opportunity to say something we didn't mention, and it's related to the declaration. You know, when it comes to gender, I think for the Western Balkans region, it's very important to tackle gender-based violence, which is overwhelming and deeply entrenched in the Western Balkan countries' culture and attitudes. And I think this declaration recognizes vulnerabilities and seeks for solidarity and trust and security in the Western Balkans region. And I really hope that this will be a machine that will take Berlin process forward on healthier legs, if you like.
Thank you very, very much. We started with Heine and ended with a very positive note. Thank you very much to this wonderful panel. Give them a big applause.